Here we go. Not sure if you can hear me yet. I understand that there's a delay in the audio, so I'll give people just a few minutes. Great. Thanks, John. I'm going to ignore that, Dave. I start presenting. You should see my screen here. In a little bit, I'll go off camera just to save a little bit of bandwidth. But I did want you to see what I look like, see my cool whiteboard and the Salesforce logo stickers behind it. Okay, we have 14 right now, 15, 16 and growing. Thank you everyone for your patience with this new forum, this new platform. Okay, so we're going to get started. You should see my screen. This session is going to be on developing Lightning Web Components. This session is designed for someone who's new into developing Salesforce Lightning Web Components. I'll talk about what they are, and then I'll show you a couple of demos. I'll write some code. You can see what that code looks like live. So this is a Salesforce presentation. I will be telling you about a few things that are on the roadmap. So this is your reminder to make your purchasing and investment decisions based on what's currently available today, not things that might be in the roadmap. I'll make sure that it's clear what items are available, what items are on the roadmap. Okay, here's our agenda today. I'll do a brief introduction so that you know who I am, where I'm coming from. We'll talk about some of the development tools that you'll see today. And then for Lightning Web Components, I'm going to cover basically the creation and editing. I'll talk about attributes, properties, and events. There's something really cool with Lightning Web Components or Web Components in general called Lifecycle Hooks. If you come from a programming background, that'll be somewhat familiar to you. I'll show you how to take those Lightning Web Components, which are client-side, and talk to your server-side Apex code. We'll show you something that's in public beta called the Local Development Server. I want to show you some of the other rich resources that we have for Lightning Web Components, and then we'll save some time toward the end for questions. Okay. Going forward, this is me. My name is Michael Norton. I'm a technical architect for Salesforce.com. I've been at Salesforce for 2 years. Prior to that, I was a Salesforce developer for 10, 12 years. I've been at very large companies with large Salesforce operations, such as AAA of Northern California. We had a very successful Salesforce practice there. And then also, most recently, American Express in North Phoenix. We had a very, very large implementation there. So that's my background. Prior to that, I did a number of things. I did some Java development, some Oracle PL SQL development, Informatica, everything from being a system administrator to a database administrator to being a network administrator. So I played a lot of roles. So now I'm going to turn my camera off and we can focus on getting into the presentation here. So, try this again. Go back to sharing the screen. New platform. Okay. Give me just 1 minute. Okay, we're ready to get started. So let's fast forward here. So what are we looking at? Some of the Salesforce Developer Tools that you'll see here today are all free. We have the Salesforce CLI, which is, you may understand that it's part of what we call Salesforce DX, the developer experience. And the Salesforce DX includes a number of things. It's the CLI, it's the builders, it's all of our CI/CD tools that are coming down the road, as well as VS Code. Visual Studio Code is a free, very, very lightweight open editor that we've created some extensions for, and all of those extensions are available for free. So the Salesforce CLI is free, extensions for VS Code is free, and then I'll show you the local development server. This is handy. If you're a JavaScript developer, if you're a front-end developer, you're really not used to sort of pushing up to an org or pushing into an environment. You should be able to run that locally, and I'll show you how you can do that today. Here's one of the roadmap items. This is currently in pilot. So Code Builder is a sort of a webified IDE, and it has all of the tools that you launch from your browser. We're using what used to be called Microsoft Code Spaces. It's now called GitHub Code Spaces, which is a VM out in the cloud that you access through your browser. So the experience will be log into your Salesforce org, launch the Code Builder, and then you've got everything that you need there. All of the same experience that you have doing local development. Now, good, bad, handy. I think it's going to help a lot of people that are running on various machines. It's going to help them get up to speed faster, not have to worry about getting approval for downloading and installing different tools on your corporate laptop. Personally, I like having the experience of having the tools remote, because I use these tools for other things. I'm not just editing Salesforce code, I'm editing other code. And I'm doing a lot from the command line. I like having those tools local. So pros and cons, I just want to be make sure you're well informed. So what are Lightning Web Components? Well, a brief history lesson. 10, 15 years ago, the UI framework for writing any custom apps in Salesforce was Apex Pages, formerly known as Visual Force Pages. And those were relevant to the technology at the time, browser-based. They did the server-side connection. If you're familiar with, ASP or JSPs and Java servlets, it worked in very much that same way. You think about what happened about 10 years ago, the world went to almost a mostly mobile experience. In Visual Force, and that heavy load of transferring the view state from the device, from the browser into the server was a little bit too much overhead. So there were a lot of mobile frameworks being developed at the time. Salesforce in 2015 launched what's called the Aura framework, which wasn't very heavily standards based. It was kind of a new area, sort of a new realm. 2018, January 2018, we launched. Sorry, it was January of 2019. We launched Lightning Web Components, which are standards based. We're actually involved with the World Wide Web Consortium to establish these standards. So if you've seen web components in other languages, you're going to look at this and say, wow, that's just like Angular, or that's just like some of the other UI platforms. So that's what we have, and these are wonderfully flexible. You can have these inside your Salesforce org. You can put them on communities, and best of all, they behave the same way and have the same look and feel on a mobile device. So, Marissa, are there any questions, or John, are there any questions so far? Good. I know there's a delay, so I'll give you just a minute. Okay, I'm going to move forward. So this is Cactus Force. Our slogan is more code, less fluff. So we're done with the fluff. I'm going to break out of this presentation and then go right into into the tooling, into this Lightning Web, VS Code. So here I have a fresh Visual Studio Code project, a Salesforce DX project. And this is linked to what we call a Scratch org. I'm going to make this a little bit larger. This is linked to a Scratch org, which is very similar to a sandbox, only it's built to be disposable. The idea behind Scratch orgs is that you rebuild from source control each time, and it just reinforces it by not being a long-term org. That's enough about Scratch orgs. One thing I do want to point out is that there is a configuration file within the project called the project Scratch org Scratch definition. One thing I've added that's not normally included is this has sample data equals true. There are tons of properties that you can set up here to modify your organization. I'm going to be creating a developer edition. Has sample data equals true is one I like to use because when I load up into an org, I like there to be records in there. So it'll have some sample accounts, it'll have sample contacts, leads, opportunities, and so forth. So enough about Scratch org definitions. Let's actually get into building code, building some Lightning Web Components. Now, I'd like you to look at the perspective of someone who maybe understands Salesforce and is brand new to Lightning Web Components. Maybe they've dabbled in Aura, maybe they're familiar with Visualforce, but that's kind of where I'm coming from. That's how I tailored this. A brief overview of the IDE. I do have. I've downloaded the Salesforce plugin for Visual Studio Code. I keep doing that. So all of that is here. There's a shortcut within VS Code. For the Mac, it's Command-Shift-P, and that opens up all of the command palette basically. So let me do one thing. I'm going to open up that Scratch org. I'm going to show you what that looks like. And it just looks like a regular Salesforce environment. So that's kind of neat. I can just launch it right from my browser, from the editor. So I've got it's just an empty Salesforce org. It's got some records in the standard objects, but so let's go back into the editor and we'll create a Lightning Web Component, just kind of the simplest hello world version of it. So I'm going to do.
Michael, sorry to interrupt. Do you mind increase the font size or the screen size? It may be a bit smaller for people that's watching. Thank you.
Yeah. Is that better?
Yes.
Great. Okay. All right. Thank you. Okay. So if I go to my Force app and I click on my LWC is the folder for new Lightning Web Components. As you can see, I've got a command down here called sfdx create Lightning Web Components. So it's aware, the IDE is aware of where I am in the project. So I'm going to create that new Lightning Web Component, and I'm just going to call this Cactus Force Demo Component, and I'll put it in the LWC folder. Plenty of options. And as we can see here, it by default created 3 files. It created an HTML file, a JavaScript file, and a metadata file. The HTML is the view. The JS file, the JavaScript file, is the controller. And if I wanted to, I could create a .css file, and that would be the cascading style sheet that would apply to this Lightning Web Component. I'm not going to do that today, but I did want to make sure that everyone understands that every Lightning Web Component is going to have a folder, a parent folder, and it's going to have the HTML, JavaScript, and metadata. Okay, so let's go in and we will create our first. I didn't pull up the HTML. Let me double click that. Everything in a Lightning Web Component has to exist within a template in that HTML. So I'm just going to say hello world, right? If I save that, it just saves locally to my hard drive. If I want to deploy that, I can hit Command-Shift-P and then push that out to my default Scratch org. If you've done this before, you know that I'm missing a critical step. I did that on purpose. I'm going to go into the app builder, and I'm going to zoom in here a little bit. Hopefully this resolution is okay and everyone can see. So I'm going to create a new Lightning page. I want this to be an app page. All right, I'm going to have to zoom out because I need to see the next button. Okay, this will be my Lightning Web Component Explorer. I just want it to be one region. I just want to be able to test one region. So we're good. Now, if I look at my component, these are the standard components that Salesforce gives you that you can drop on your page. And here are the properties of each component. There's nothing in the custom. Well, you're going to run into that over and over until you make that visible. And the way to make it visible within Salesforce in different areas is the metadata file. The is exposed needs to be true. We also need to tell it which targets that this Lightning Web component is valid for. You do that using this sort of obscure looking markup, just saying the targets are a Lightning app page. Now, if I save this and then redeploy it, not too bad, didn't take too long. Let's refresh. Let's actually drop something here. Rich text. Yep, my LWC Explorer. If I just hit refresh, it's going to walk me through the wizard to choose my template and so forth. So, okay. Okay, I'm going to go back, edit that page again, and now I should have my custom component. I'm just going to drag that right into that first page here. In the preview, you can already, well, you can't tell, I can't even tell, is going to say hello world. Now that I have that app, I can go to the app launcher and find my LWC Explorer. Hopefully you can see that it just says hello world. It's not decorated, it doesn't look nice, but we're gonna start from there. So we've just walked through the equivalent of hello world. Okay. Now let's change that up a bit. We don't need to see that HTML anymore. We just need those two components. We need the JavaScript and the HTML. So in the HTML, I'm going to have it reference a bound variable that I haven't even created yet. And that's going to be name. I also need to put that into my controller. I just need to define that. That's the definition. I've just created a definition. So now if I said, hello Cactus Force, and save it, and then deploy it, then you would see it out here on my in my Salesforce org. Let's quick start and go right into the local development server because we want to be able to see it right when it saves. So I'm going to start my local development server. Okay, this is going to be running just on my laptop. And it launches right into it, shows me my one component. So now I can see it says, hello, Cactus Force. You may not be able to see that, but how about that? Can you see hello, Cactus Force? So that's cool. That's all we have to do to bind a variable. If you were working with Aura components, there would be about 10 times as much code here, right? But that's it. This is just the binding of that name. So let's go a little further and make this an actual property. We'll make name a property. So if we say API and import the API, I can now decorate this with the API decorator. I've now made name one of the component properties of this Lightning Web component. Okay, well, what does that actually mean? Let's embed that in another Lightning Web component. Before I do that, are there any questions? I'll just pause for a minute.
There's nothing in the chat. Yeah, feel free to ask a question in the chat or click on the request to speak if you want to speak. your question, I can allow you in.
Yeah, so I think I may have overlooked the obscurity of the naming. Lightning Web Components generally start with a lowercase, and they're what's known as camel case. So I've got Salesforce Demo Component. If you see what that looks like over here, it's actually C dash, which means component, and then Salesforce, and it uses what's called kebab case, which is the hyphens in between all lowercase. It uses kebab case to reference that. So I could use this now in another Lightning component, which is what I'm going to do, and then show you how I pass a property into that Lightning Web component. Okay, so from the Lightning Web components, I'll say component container in the Lightning Web components, and then this is going to be a super simple container. It's just going to hold I am the container, and then a reference. Here's how you put a Lightning Web component inside another Lightning Web component. I'm going to say C-Salesforce demo component name is equal to, how about Dave? Yeah. Okay. Now I've just created that Lightning Web component. I have another one over here. So I have my Salesforce demo component, my C component container. I am the container, and it passed in the property Dave. So that's kind of cool. That's how you get components sort of passing values down to other components below. Okay. What if I want to have a subcomponent send a message or send information to the component above it? Well, for that we use events in the DOM. So I'm going to create a few new Lightning Web components to demonstrate what events look like and how you pass messages sort of up to the parent. Okay. Let me close some of these, and I'm going to create, because you don't want to just watch me type, I am going to drop in an event thrower, right? And I'm going to have the HTML and the JavaScript for those. And I'm going to have an event handler. In that same Lightning Web component. So I want the JavaScript and the HTML. Now I'm going to close my Explorer and go into the thrower. Well, what's the thrower going to have? I've already got that. I'm going to drop that in. And let's take a look at this. I've got a paragraph in my HTML markup. There's nothing new there. But I've also got this Lightning button. And as you can see, the VS Code is smart enough to know what the attributes of this Lightning component are. So it is of a variant, and it has a name called dispatch event, a title, and check this out. It's got an on click. So when anyone clicks on this button, it's going to execute the handle click inside that JavaScript controller. So let's go into that JavaScript controller and give that some logic. Okay. And we just say, inside the body, we're going to give it a method called handle click. And what this is going to do is it's going to dispatch a new custom event. And look at this. This is what I want you to pay attention to. Cactus Force. I just created a random event called Cactus Force. I can call this whatever I want. That's not mind-blowing. It's just text. You're just passing text into something in the DOM. But when I go into the event handler, this is the part that blows my mind. I'm going to drop the code in here. This is fine. I'm going to have a property called message. But I've referenced this event thrower. I don't want that in there yet. That's another property. But look at this handler. On Cactus Force. That's just bizarre. This on Cactus Force is smart enough to know that if an event called Cactus Force is thrown up to this component, then handle that event, right? And this message right here, this is just the method inside the handler's JavaScript. So let's create that method. Oops. I'm going to drop that code in here now. Let's take a look at what we've got here. Once again, I've imported that API from the Lightning Web Components. I've decorated something called message as an API. Now it can be a parameter for that Lightning Web Component. And then the handle Cactus Force event just says, just add this Cactus Force event thrown to the message, and the message is part of the HTML. It's bound here. So let's take a look at that. Now, if we go back to the local development server, we should have those two new components here, the event handler and the event thrower. Let's take a look at the event thrower. It should have a button here. Did I not save that? I didn't save. Unlike, here we go. Welcome to Cactus Force Preview, dispatch an event. Well, that's great. It just dispatched an event, but nothing handled it. So let's go back up to the event handler. Okay, so this is from my event handler. These two items are from the subcomponent, the event thrower. So watch when I click dispatch event, it throws that event to the parent. The parent says, okay, I've got that Cactus Force event. Now I'm going to call the method inside my controller to execute something, right? Pretty powerful. So when I think about the sort of the basic building blocks that developers need to get started doing Lightning Web Components, these are some of the things that I thought would be relevant. Okay, well, what else might we want to do with Lightning Web Components? Of course, we're going to want to interact with the data in the org. Otherwise, it's just sort of these corny, dumb components. So let's now look at what it's going to take to execute some Apex. Maybe you want to execute some code or query some data. You want to create some sort of smart, querying tool. So before we do that, I'm going to create the Apex controller. And I'm going to call this the account data service. Okay, so remember that name. This is my Apex class. Account data service. And in here, I am going to have, I don't like that here. Okay, let me show you what that class looks like. All it does is it says it's a public class with sharing, so it respects the rules. If I want to make an Apex method invocable by Lightning Web Components or Aura, we're using this tag here, Aura enabled. So this is going to return a static list of accounts, just called query accounts. And it's just going to return the results of this SOCL query. Okay, I can save that. I'm not going to deploy yet. I'm going to do that all at once. But now I'll create a Lightning Web Component that actually invokes this Apex. And I'll show you how to literally wire that together. I'm creating a new Lightning Web Components, so the UI to handle that data. And that's going to be, I'm just going to say query accounts. Right, put that in the regular folder. And in the HTML, I'm going to create an iterator, something that's going to iterate over the various accounts. We'll walk through this kind of line by line, or some of the lines, let's say. So you can see I've got, I'm going to have something called accounts, right? And there's going to be a button saying load accounts. It's going to say handle load, right? Handle that button event. And then it's going to say, okay, for all of my accounts, do a for each. This should look fairly familiar. The item is going to be account. So show me my ID and the account name. It's just a simple list, but it demonstrates the invocation. Now this is where it gets kind of interesting. I'm going to go into the JavaScript for this component. Save that. And then let's take a look at this. What am I doing here? I'm actually importing a function called Salesforce Apex Account Data Service. This is the name of my Apex class, and this is the method. Okay, and that's going to be bound to a variable called getAccountList. So later, when I create this function and give it the promise that when it's done, load up this dot accounts. That's this variable defined here. Load that up with the result, and it's smart enough to know how to parse that JSON string that comes back from the server. And if not, here's some trap logic for anything else. So let's save all of that. I think I've got it all saved. The other thing I want to do is I want to expose it so that I can put that in my Lightning Web Component Explorer. So let's go back into that metadata file, and I'm gonna give it sort of the show up anywhere permission. I'm gonna copy that in. All of this is going to be available on the web component reference, so you don't have to take a picture of this, you don't have to screenshot or anything. So it's exposed and it's now available in all of these various things. So I could put it on a record page, I could put it on a home page, on a tab by itself. I can even put it in the community. So lots of options here. I'm gonna hit save on that and deploy that, push that to my default scratch org. Then that should be available so that I can add it to that app page. Okay, coming back in, account data service. File name mismatch. Oh, okay. So my account data service, I've got a spelling error in here somewhere, right? Account data service. Let me take this and make sure that that's the same here. And account data service. Looks okay.
I think, oh, there's a missing R in the service. Thank you, Dave. Elliot.
Nice. Okay, let's try that again. Good catch. Okay. Unable to find Apex action class account data service. Yeah, okay. Once again. Okay, try that. Third time's a charm, right? Ta-da. Thank you, everyone. Okay, good job. Let's go back to my Lightning Web Component Explorer. And we'll do a little shortcut here. Let me make that a little larger. Nope, not that large. We'll do a shortcut and we'll go right into that page. Drag our query accounts component right onto this Lightning or LWC Explorer. Okay, so this is nearly impossible to read. That's fine, but we'll just say 100%. There we go. Cool. Let's put that query accounts right under the hello cactus for us. And then we will save that. Go back. Okay. Now we've got this, and we're gonna hit that sockle query. So that's pretty cool. So let's recap what we've been able to do. We've been able to to add attributes, properties to Lightning Web Components. We can embed Lightning Web Components inside other Lightning Web Components, which makes the Lego system, right? You can build whatever you want and to whatever level of abstraction that you want. And we've been able to execute Apex, so that's pretty powerful. We haven't talked about any of the inputs yet, so of course you want to have inputs to forms. So let's mosey on over to where you can find references for those items. Okay, here, and I can make these larger as well. This is the Lightning Web Component reference page, which is really helpful. If you were around for the launch of Aura components, it was an absolute mystery. You're going through PDFs and good luck finding all of that stuff. I think that Salesforce really did it right when we launched the component reference, made these items live right on the app. So if I'm looking for something like an input field, yeah, let's find the input field. Hopefully you can see this. I'll try to make it a little bit larger. If you take the input field, the documentation is right here. There's sample code. You've even got live somewhere in here is the live. Maybe I'm thinking of something else. Maybe I'm thinking of like the button, right? If you go to a button, yeah. So if I want to see just basic buttons, it's loading the preview. These are the basic buttons. If I want to see advanced buttons, inverse buttons, I can check those here. Here's the source code. So you can just take this, copy, paste it into your IDE, save it, view it in the local development server, and then on you go. So pretty powerful stuff. These things are live. So if we want to, there should be a play button on here somewhere. Maybe it's hidden because of the because of where I am here. But these are very active things. So component reference is here. Developer guide, tons of good info here. One of the other things that I wanted to talk about was Lifecycle Hooks. So because of the inheritance from Lightning Web Components and standard components, we'll do this, web components will do this regardless. There are things called lifecycle hooks, methods that you can put into your controller that'll execute at particular times during the life cycle of the web component. This one here is probably the one I use most, the connected callback. The connected callback is a method that'll execute immediately when the item is rendered, when it's inserted into the document. So if I just merely put a connected callback method, let me pull one from my snippets over here. If I put this connected callback into, let's put it into one of the simpler ones, into that Salesforce demo, right? If I just drop that here, let me get rid of that. That's unsightly right there. If I just have a connected callback and send something to the console to say, to say a message or something, and I save that. Okay, when I go to my local development server and I look at the Salesforce demo component, guess what? It fired. But we didn't know because I didn't inspect it. If you're familiar with front ends and the inspect tool that comes with Google Chrome, then you'll notice this, right? If I look at the console, this is basically the output of console.log. So if I want to troubleshoot, I'll often do that. I won't do like a debugger type thing. The first thing I do is I log, but that's just me. But yeah, it took the message. Hopefully you can see that. If I can zoom that in a little bit, maybe. I can't zoom there. That's fine. So any sort of debugging that you want to do, just console.log. But yeah, there's these other lifecycle hooks, things like a constructor. If you're familiar with object-oriented programming, you know what a constructor is. Disconnected callbacks, these are just various hooks that exist that when you implement them, they'll take place during the life cycle of that component. But wait, there's more. So what else can you do with Lightning Web Components? Well, if you think about anything that you can do with JavaScript, it becomes pretty powerful. And then when you embed these in the Lightning mobile app, in the Salesforce mobile app, then all those capabilities, a lot of those capabilities of things like the phones and the accelerometer, the camera, the location services, all of those come to life. I created a Lightning Web Component that uses the geolocation API, and it's scary how close you can get to your own location. It found out where I was in my house. It's that It's that advanced. There's a barcode scanner here. I created this as a demo for one of my customers where they wanted to send their own customers a QR code with their customer ID on it. And then they wanted to be able to scan with their own phone that QR code and then pull up all the customer information. That worked beautifully. So tons of options there. So I do want to show you some of the other resources, like where you can find more. If you want to get sample code, if you just Google Trailhead Sample Gallery, you're gonna end up here. A lot of UI based, a lot of drag and drop features within the e-bikes recipe. The Lightning Web Component recipes is perfect. I use that all the time. In fact, let me open that up when I'm done here. Great mapping examples. Here's the LWC recipe for open source, all of the open source items. Easy Spaces is another one if you're organizing things graphically. Very, very cool. Lots of great examples here. Don't go studying the guides. Look at the reference examples. So right now, I always have an org, a Salesforce Developer Edition org, a free one, tied to the recipes. So don't worry about the open org. That's my own wizardry. So if I open the Lightning Web Component recipes org, I can say, okay, here's my basic examples. Things that fill in things. What if I want to invoke Apex? Okay, well, this is right where I loaded that I got the code from load accounts. So I just copied this code. So if I load account, okay, that's what it does. How do I see the code? Well, there's links right in here to view that source code on GitHub. And like I did for most of this demo, I just said, okay, I'm going to copy and paste a lot of that code. If you see some of the decorations or some of the stylings and styles and boxes and things in that recipes, in this org, in these examples, then you can copy the stylings, right? Like I'm not going to remember SLDS var m around medium, right? I just copy the code from where I know it works. Okay, so that's another great resource. The sample gallery, plenty out there on Trailhead for this. I think there's something like 20 different Trailhead modules on learning Lightning Web Components. So let me make sure I covered everything that I wanted to cover. I got the query accounts in there. Yeah, I think that was it. We'll come back to the presentation mode and go right into questions. Do we have questions queued up? Do you want me to go a little deeper into
on the chat,
one of the topics here?
Excuse that I'm not well versed in Salesforce, so I'm not sure if the question was answered. But Tammy had a question about how does local development server work when Salesforce data is needed?
Sometimes it does work. That is a great question. Sorry about the scrolling and everything, but let's explore something, right? This query accounts Lightning Web Component. What does that do when it's the local web server, right? LWC. Here it is, right? So what would happen if I went to the query accounts and this thing came up and said load accounts? Yeah, it's not going to pick up that data. So I think what I would do, I think the answer to that is, oh, hey, look. Okay, now I have to backpedal on what I was going to do. The answer is it's magic. It's just magic. I mean, it is, there's intelligence within the Lightning, within the local development server that knows which org it's associated to, and it just binds that locally to that Apex, right? If you think about what a regular Lightning Web Component would do, it comes to your browser, it's client side, and it's aware of the Salesforce server. It has that authentication into that server. And that's, without giving you the very scientific answer, that's how it sort of knows. So pretty powerful, right? I think I've tried that before, and maybe I just didn't give it enough time to execute and thought, well, I thought it worked, but it was broken. So
we have another question
yeah,
from
I
Sarah.
hope that answers the question.
This is from a while ago, and she said, did I understand correctly, the API can be embedded in a component?
The API can be embedded in the component. I think if we're, I think the answer is yes. So if I do Salesforce demo components, where did I do embedding here?
I think it was early on in your demo,
Did I do it here?
your coding demo.
No, in my, oh yeah, in the component container. Yeah, so this, let me just expand that a little bit, shrink it. When I reference this Salesforce demo component, and then I give it a property name and say that name is Dave, it's actually passing this into this Salesforce demo component as a property. And we were able to do that because of this JavaScript here, because I mentioned it in the API and I decorated it with the @API. I hope that makes sense. I could do another one. I could do API, phone number, right? Just set it to nothing. Just because I've got it here decorated with the API, that now becomes a property that I can pass from the container. So I can now pass in, okay, name is Dave, but now, phone number is equal to, Dave, what's your phone number? It's 480, let's see. I'm just kidding, right? Now I can pass that in. Sarah, I hope I answered your question.
And I think Dave has a question, unless it isn't a question, but it says, are there any places that we can use Aura,
no.
and can I use LWC?
Places where you can use Aura, but not LWC, or where you can use them together? Aura. Yeah, I'm going to say I don't know. I know in the recipes, which is here somewhere. In the recipes, there is a place for Aura interoperability. And I believe you can put a Lightning Web component inside an Aura component, but you can't put an Aura component inside a Lightning Web component. But I'm not sure if there's places like communities or something, or in a chatbot, some sort of bot, that you can only use Aura. I think I'm fairly certain that Lightning Web Components covers the spectrum of where you could put Aura.
Custom community themes and layout have to be Aura.
Okay, all right, thanks, Chuck. I was going to ask Chuck, but I wasn't sure if he was still on.
And I think that's it.
Cool. Okay. So one more thing I'd like to add, because this is, two more things I'd like to add. Let me show you something. If you've ever developed Lightning Web Components and you've gotten to, where's my Explorer, right? If I do another deployment, sometimes I have to push refresh twice, which is a pain, right? Let me show you, and you might want to write this down. If you go into Setup, and you go into Session Settings, now this is just when you're developing. You wouldn't tell a user to do this because it would slow the whole system down. If you go into Session Settings, and I'll blow this up, this Enable Secure and Persistent Browser Caching to improve performance, turn that off if you're developing Lightning Web Components. And then you deploy it and you hit refresh. You don't have to double click on refresh. So that's one sort of useful tip.
People can...
The very last thing I'll say, sorry, yeah. Let me go in there. Yeah, definitely. Sorry for this. Okay, go ahead and refresh. Yeah, it's this one right here. It's this one. Enable secure and persistent browser caching to improve performance. Turn that off. Okay. And then the very last thing I'll say is be careful when you're dealing with things like platform events, which is a part of which is a feature that was released 2 or 3 years ago. Platform events are where you publish things to the message bus, and then you can read from that, right? It creates this beautiful decoupled event-driven framework. If you can, always get to those platform events on platform, meaning get to those events, platform events, subscribe to them in your Apex. Don't subscribe to them in your Lightning Web Component. The reason I say that is because there are limits on the number of subscribers to those events. And if you're running this through Lightning Web Component, you're subscribing to that event using Comet D protocol, and you're consuming one of those events that are limited, one of those subscription events that are limited. And if you launch this to 500 users and they're clicking on that and pulling those events off of the message bus, you're going to consume those events very, very quickly. So always consume those events server side. Okay.
Yeah, there's one more, and I know we may be running over.
John, are there any more questions?
Oh yeah, there's. So I guess Chuck, if you want to go ahead and ask your question first, and I'll go to Ethan afterwards.
Am I unmuted?
We can hear.
I was just wondering if you had any sort of advice for things that trip people up when they first get started with LWCs, or if nothing comes to mind, maybe what are some of the conceptual things people struggle with the most when they get started?
Yeah, I think it's these the decorators. I'm pretty sure it's the decorators that trip people up, and the concept of inter-component communication. And those are the items that I wanted to highlight during this presentation. Right, you can easily get a demo of what Lightning components can do. These are the kind of the 4 or 5 main gotchas. Chuck, you're well versed in Lightning Web Components. Do you have some that
naming convention
you
sometimes, like the camel case
see
versus
people struggle
the
with?
hyphenated kebab stuff?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and what makes things even more confusing is if you look at this Salesforce demo component, it starts with a lowercase, but wait a minute, the class name is uppercase. And what's really, really complex is, let's say for some reason I overloaded and named a Lightning component something LWC, right? Like calling an Apex class, account data service Apex class. If I use those uppercase letters in an abbreviation and they're all together, well, you're going to have to put the kebab through all of those. So if I were, if I had a Lightning Web component that was called, C demo LWC, like that, it's going to come across as LWC, right? So watch out for that.
Yes, okay. We have one from Ethan.
Cool.
When doing
when
doing an @wire call that depends on another @wire call, how do you ensure the order of the operations?
Oh wow. I don't know if you can ensure the order
I'm
of
not trying to
operation.
co-opt your session.
I bet you Chuck knows.
No. Well, both the wires are going to fire when the component loads
with this
and you're not ready. So you have to be ready for it to fire once and you're not ready. So you just like check for something. There's a semaphore pattern, SEMAPHORE. It's like the old flagging system that is used in multi-threading. That would be good here. Basically, you set a Boolean for you're ready when you're ready, and then the wire that you want to, it has to wait. You check to see if the flag is set. And if it's not set, you check again later, like on a timer or something.
Yeah. Thanks, Chuck.
I don't see anything in the chat. No one
All
has
right. How are we,
requested
John?
to speak.
Well, here's the only cartoon characters involved with this presentation for your entertainment. So hopefully you all enjoyed
Yeah,
this,
you
and
can
if there's any
connect with them in
questions
the
later
chat.
on, feel free to connect with me.
Also, we're in the networking session at this time. So on your left side of your screen, you'll see the networking now has a now button on it. So if you click on networking, you'll get into that session. And when you're ready to network with someone, click you are ready, and Hopin will automatically put you in with another Cactus Force attendee tonight. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Michael, for that great presentation. We're so delighted to hear all about it. So we'll see you all over in the networking session.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, thanks, Marilyn.